Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Everyone is awake. Good afternoon.
Oh, Donald.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. The time now is 4:40. As a reminder, please note that the board meetings are being recorded for the convenience of those unable to attend these meetings. Recording and closed captioning will be posted to the BERS YouTube channel following the meeting. Alex, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Corinna Poland,
Here.
Phoebe Shade Arnold. Tazina Zad, thank you. Aaron Bogad, Janelle Chacon, Lily Chan. Thank you. Marjorie Dienstag is attending remotely under extraordinary circumstances. Amy Fair, Gregory Faulkner. Present. Thank you. Anita Garcia.
Present.
Anita Garcia is also attending remotely under extraordinary circumstances. Trustees attending remotely under extraordinary circumstances can participate in conversations and vote, but their presence doesn't count towards quorum. Cherie Gibson.
Present.
Thank you. Anthony Giordano.
Present.
Thank you. Angela Green. Naveed Hassan. Alice Ho.
In transit.
First.
Alice is.
Alice looks like she's in
Okay.
motion.
Okay.
Like I'm trying to get here without.
She was.
Allison Hirsch.
Present on behalf of Controller Brad Lander.
Thank you. Jessamine Lee, I'm told, is also attending remotely
Hi.
under extraordinary circumstances. John Maderick.
Present.
Thank you. Donald Nesbitt.
Present.
Thank you. Alan Ong. Present. Thank you. Kalira Salas Ramirez. Mahisha Sapp.
Present.
Thank you. Thomas Shepard. Venus Zitzang. Gladys Ward.
Present.
Thank you. Ephraim Zachary.
Present.
Thank you.
Alex, do we have a quorum?
My name was.
We just missed. Somebody wasn't. Hi. Hi, Michelle Joseph. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you very much. Michelle Joseph present. Thank you. Okay, yes, we've got 14.
Thank you, Alex. The first item on the agenda is calendar item number 1, noted in the minutes of the meeting for the Board of Retirement System held on June 13th, 2023 and June 14th, 2023. May we have a motion to consider? So moved, Tony Gitano, second, John Matarich. Any discussion on the minutes? Any discussion on the minutes? Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing no discussion. When I call in favor, please indicate if you're in favor of approving the minutes. In favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's update. Sandy, you have any remarks for us?
Thank you, Donald. I'll keep this brief, given our time pressures. If we get to it, we'll be talking about the asset allocation tonight. Just to give you a highlight, we're increasing the allocation to core fixed income and U.S. equities, decreasing an allocation to high yield bonds, international equity, and private equity, eliminating TIPS exposure, and introducing a strategic allocation to cash of approximately 0.5%. And there'll be no increased allocation to our alternative asset classes. You'll get more of a briefing later in the meeting on that, with far more detail from far more informed people than I am. This recommendation is endorsed by BERS Investment Strategy, Siegel Marco, and BAM. Velocity project update. The Secure Act 2.0, which mandated some Rothification requirements for makeup contributions, has been suspended for 2 years. But we are marching ahead with our Rothification of the TDA. We fully expect to provide Roth options for both contributions and catch-up contributions as early as January, but as late as no later than February, in my expectation. And we expect to provide rollover capabilities during the year. So we are pressing ahead for the benefit of our members. We are, well, law department's present. If we do get to the issue of some of our governance questions, they're here to answer questions about that. Educational opportunities, very quickly. BAM University, September 29th. Got great feedback from last week's BAM University. John or Allison, would you like to add a little more to the sales pitch?
Sure, although I think Alan, Tony, Maisha, and Alice might be able to say more, but, and Greg.
That's a way of saying I didn't, I'm not getting my hands. Certification. I held out of BAM University.
Proud of myself.
Simple way of saying. Let's,
Yes.
remember, we have time left.
Okay, sorry. Basically, opportunity to sort of look inside how BAM functions and works on behalf of the trustees. And pass out, we have materials that even if you can't attend, we will make sure that everybody has access to both the hard copy and the electronic copy of material so that you can look through it. That sort of goes through the process of how from asset allocation to investment recommendation to following up, and everyone is invited and welcome, and we'll be there on Friday. And also Friday morning, former White House Chief of Staff Jack Lew is going to be in person at the beginning of the meeting is to do the thought leadership series before it starts, and that should be pretty interesting.
He was my boss at the BBGC.
There you go.
Good to see you. Okay, NCTR has a conference October 7th to 10th. And NCBERS Fall Conference, which includes their professional trustee educational and accredited trustee credential education programs, is in October 21st, 25th. The National Association of Securities Professionals has an annual symposium November 14th and 15th. And the controller on the following day, November 16th, has its Diverse and Emerging Managers Investment Conference. I encourage, especially the NASP and controllers meetings, there would be very helpful to everyone on this board. We'll continue to provide email updates on educational opportunities, but let me get out of the way of the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
May I just add with BAM University, I appreciate the efforts of them addressing the one thing that we as fiduciaries talk about all the time, and that's just not using technobabble. So they have a way of integrating the knowledge, the terminology, and keeping the flow going. So that was a very nice touch too. And I appreciate that as well as the listeners.
Certainly to echo that, we had nice insight into how BAM works, probably for the first time. And it was good seeing all the faces in person. So thanks for the effort. I know it took a lot of
Absolutely.
time and effort to do that.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Seeing none, thank you, Sandy, for your update. Next items on the agenda this afternoon is calendar item number 2 through 17, the ordinary business of birds. May we have a motion to consider? So motion. Greg, with the motion, second, Corinne, any discussion? Well, Alex, please tell us about the ordinary business of birds.
Of course, these are all the retirements, death benefits, and refunds processed since the last meeting of this board.
Thank you, Alex. We will now have a vote on these items. All in favor, please indicate if you're in favor. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is calendar item number 18, adoption of the Disability Committee's recommendations. May we have a motion to consider? Motion, Tazeen.
Second.
Second, Anthony Giordano. Alex, please tell us about the Disability Committee's recommendations.
Certainly. At the Disability Committee meeting held in September, the Disability Committee recommended 1, approval of a World Trade Center accidental disability and 2 denials of disability.
Thank you, Alex. We'll now take this to a vote. All those in favor of calendar item number 18, please indicate if you approve. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is calendar item number 19, authorization to the controller of the city of New York to invest, sell, and exchange the funds of the retirement system. We have a motion to consider.
So moved.
Motion,
Okay.
Greg Faulkner, second, Effie. Salil, are you here?
Virtually.
Salil, please tell us about this resolution.
Sorry, I don't think this-
Salil?
Yeah, I don't think this is for me, is it?
On a quarterly basis, we approve the controller's execution of all the cash management and execution of our investment decision-making process through resolutions, which we deliver to the controller. This is a quarterly event. Previously, it had been annual, but we made it quarterly about 4 years ago.
Thank you, Sandy, AKA Salil.
I'm not as smart as he is.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Greg?
Yeah, and I'm gonna vote in favor of this, but I'm just hopeful that as we move forward, the Bureau of Asset Management and the Controller's Office will bring us more investments that reflect the BIPOC community. But when we look at the numbers, and I asked to see the numbers, out of the 60 investments that have come to us, only 5 have represented folks in the BIPOC community. And that's really not acceptable. And what I'm hoping is that we're gonna see some movement. I know at one point we submitted some names of firms that we thought would be qualified, and we were at one point told they weren't in the controller's pipeline. And so I hope that that system will be corrected so that because begins to happen is we start to feel that there are roadblocks. Every time we make a step, there's another roadblock put in our pathway. So I know we review these quarterly. So at this time, I'm willing to say yes, but I'm hoping that we can sit down and have a serious conversation about the investments that come before this board and that those investments reflect our membership and also reflect our community. I mean, what we keep hearing is it's difficult to find investments, it's difficult to find managers. And my response to that is you're never going to find what you're not looking for. And my feeling is that there hasn't been a real effort to look for that type of investment. And so those folks who are responsible for doing that, I hope that we can see some progress as we move forward.
I will have to piggyback on what Greg is actually saying too. I think conversation and collaboration will get this done. But it has to get better. We represent at the system 70% of people of color, mainly women, right? And their own children can benefit from some of the investments that we make, right? And so as we continue to look at, investment with the controller's office and with the Bureau of Asset Management, there has to be continued conversation in getting this done.
I'm happy. No, I just want to jump in and say that I agree 100%. Obviously, I'm the trustee for the controller's delegated trustee. I'm not the investment staff. However, I think there's a real commitment to increasing the number, and we usually within the controller's office refer to them as MWBE manager firms because there has also been a shortage of women. And if you actually look at the number, women of color are the least represented of all of the investment managers. And so what I want to suggest, if it's okay, and I talked to the chair about this earlier, the Bureau of Asset Management investment team has been going through a process of the last few months to try to understand develop both achievable in the reality based on how the process works and ambitious goal to increase the representation of MWBE investment managers within the pension fund investment universe. Tafe Ayodele, who is the director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Emerging Manager Programs, has been leading that effort, though one thing has been clear that, she's one person and we have investment staff across, and we can't do anything if we don't have their ownership and buy-in. And you're right, Greg, if you're not looking for something, you're never going to find it. And so that has been a big part of that process internally, is sort of pushing the investment team to be willing to identify what their unconscious biases are as they interact with investment managers. But I'd like to suggest that at either a regular board meeting or executive committee meeting, and I leave that to the will of the trustees, Taffy come and present that plan and that path that she's laid out, so that you can see it. And then the other thing that I said to Greg that I just want to say on the record is that the Comptroller's Office has an open door policy, and the Bureau of Asset Management is supposed to have an open door policy. And if any trustees, if any consultants, if any random managers reach out to BAM and are told, no, we won't meet with you, I would like that information to get sent to me or John, because we will go knock some heads proverbially, whatever that word is, not actually, and insist that the investment team adhere to that open door policy. Now, that obviously doesn't mean that they will make an investment with anybody who comes in. I think Greg and Tony, you guys might remember the numbers. I think last year, the investment staff met with upwards of 1,031 at 1,031 meetings in fiscal year 23. So that's obviously way more investment managers than we could ever as a board approve. But they are to meet with them and to really look at these folks seriously. So I would love to see the folks who were told that they can't meet. And if that happens again, please let us know, because we will make sure that they at least are given the chance to begin the process.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's exactly what we presented some firms and we were told they were not in the pipeline. And so that we had to rule them out right away. So it's good to hear that is not going to be a barrier. And I also want to say that the use of the term BIPOC is intentional, because what we find when you use the other term is that we get people who are not people of color, who then, I'll use the term that they use, women, white women in skirts, great on skirts. And what it means is that they get a credit for that, but it doesn't reach into the hardest hit communities. So that's why we've adopted the term BIPOC. And so what we're hoping to see is BIPOC investment. And that would include women, but women of color, as part of the investment process.
I'd like to add to that, going back, since we have been, I love the transparency and I love the conversation. And I was reading over some of the literature in the handout at the university. But I'd like to say, even how it's worded, this committee here, definitely, I don't know about the firemen and the cops or whatever. I don't know what their membership, what that looks like, but this particular committee knows that there's 70-something% is people of color. And so even in the wording, this when it comes down to WBs, what have you, women, it's understood that the women that we're talking about is white women, because even in the wording, it's women, and in parentheses, Asian, Black, Hispanic, and so on and so forth. So when we're talking about the language and the frameworks that actually reflect this industry, it shows in the language first. So it's understood, what other woman would that be other than a white woman, right? And everybody else is in parentheses. So when we're talking about doing this work, it is just this ongoing conversation. It is an ongoing communication. And it also starts in the language. Got to get the language right before we start making moves. Right? Just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
If I can just chime in, yes, it is language, but also, data. So as we meet quarterly, it'll be helpful to get some quarter over quarter gains, right? So we're not 2 years down the road and then trying to figure out, what happened. So if we're meeting quarterly, it would be helpful to share what are the quarter over quarter movements that's happening, especially in those spaces. And to the issue of MWBEs, it's just a matter of also looking at that data and seeing where we underrepresented. So if it is that we're giving a report and it's supposed to be a MWBE opportunity, but there's 0 African-American males in, being identified for manager roles or, different capacities. And this is already a very, very underrepresented, but you have other minorities who are overrepresented that's being, again, increased. Are we exacerbating the situation or helping it? So I think it would be helpful to get data that actually drives these conversations as we, massage the language to move us forward.
If I can just speak to that, because I agree completely, and I'd love to see the language you're talking about, Maisha. But on the data front, one of the things that Taffy can present is she can look at how, where we're currently invested, where the disparity within the disparity is, because that's also a big point, both in terms of emerging managers and larger managers. But one of the challenges, because I want to be fully transparent, is that, we now do an annual report. The first annual report the Comptroller's Office has ever issued on MWBE investments, on emerging manager investments came out last year. They've never been publicly reported before. And one of the things that we found when we were publicly reporting for the first time was that the Bureau of Asset Management wasn't actually accurately tracking the information. So, for instance, there were fund-to-fund managers, and I know Grosvenor's on the agenda later, but it wasn't Grosvenor, but it was another one where at the time, not a single sub-manager was actually a manager of color, but the entire investment in that, and that fund-to-fund wasn't of color firm, but that entire investment was categorized as an MWB investment because it was like, it looked good and nobody was actually assessing the actual difference between an emerging manager and a of color emerging manager. And so we actually only discovered that a week before the report went out last year and had to redo all the numbers. So one of the big challenges that I want to lay out that Taffy has been driving and that is in the works is to actually track all of this, because you can't fix what you're not managing and you can't manage what you're not tracking. And so I'm not saying this is an excuse to delay. I am saying this first because I'm not 100% confident that this could actually execute a quarterly report at this moment in time, which doesn't mean we can't eventually. They can eventually, but that is a big piece of the process because the data was terrible. And we have to fix that data. Otherwise, we can't figure out how to actually increase for it.
I think it's also beyond just the data. It's really having a plan and an aspirational plan and a plan that's trackable, to your point, Alice. And I think Taffy had presented something with NYCBERS. And I think it is going to be important that you present something with the BERS that gives us the details, because once you have a real strategy and a plan, you're living into that plan, and then the results will show up in the data that addresses the disparity within the disparity and targets and prioritizes what it is we're trying to do. And I also want to say, I saw the presentation and she did a great job. And I really think that that's what we need to see, because it also highlighted for us during that presentation that the concern about our fiduciary responsibility and that emerging and or MWBE or BIPOC firms have a greater risk was debunked, right? We saw that these firms were having great outcome and great success. And so that's one of the things that keeps coming up. But without a real strategy, a plan that needs to be implemented, we're making assumptions that are not necessarily accurate assumptions. And then without tracking data, you can't see an implementation of a plan that will come to fruition. So I'm living this every day as the Chief Diversity Officer around the MW work we're doing.
Effie, Tony, Tazeen, and
Just have a simple
and then we'll
request if the
move on to the
Comptroller's
next
office
topic.
can just send us the latest report to all the trustees, that'd be.
Sure, the latest report, just for awareness, was released in November of 22, and the next annual report will be released on November 16th so happy to circulate that, but know that that is.
We try to get the latest, and then when the next one is available in November, we'll to seeing that.
And on that note, actually, hopefully you all received this, but if not, I can resend it. the Bureau of Asset Management runs an annual conference for emerging and MWB managers. It is on November 16th at UFT, at the United Federation of Teachers Building. And so if anyone is interested in attending that, that's also,
What's the limit for managers? How many managers can attend?
well, the room limit has 500 and we are over subscribed at the moment. So, but if there are folks you want to make sure are invited, I can talk to the team and see.
This is Anita Garcia, may I ask a question?
So I wanted to bring this up within the context of this discussion and not on the Grosvenor discussion, but I think there's been a discussion amongst the trustees in terms of concern about predatory nature of fund-to-fund structures. We have a majority firm managing an emerging manager, and because I know the Grosvenor folks are good folks, I know them individually, I'm not trying to indict anybody individually. It's just general concern about money being these are people in the money business. So if you have a good, as a majority fund firm managing all of these underlying sub-managers, it behooves them to have economics that are within their best interest, or if they're very successful, to keep them under the thumb, or to pull their best ideas, or to pull their best employees. So without casting aspersions on any individual firm, the structure, I think, is an inherent problem that we've discussed. And then even on the public side, on the public fund-to-fund side, I've traded these portfolios myself, where there'd be 10 underlying managers, and they all the same stock. So the emerging program was set up to fail because you have managers that are all essentially the same thing. So there wasn't diversity of investment within that structure, and that's how the program was set up. So again, it's, and I really appreciate how transparent you are in what you're saying. Because then if we're coming in from a standpoint that these programs have been set up to fail in the past, that there has been an approach to keeping diversity down systemically. And the fact that now we're on a different level and we're all trying to address it honestly and transparently, I think it's important. And that the inherent structure, the way it's set up now, could create predatory situations.
Tazeen, and then let's move to a vote.
I think Tony sort of touched on exactly what I wanted to pinpoint, because to Greg's point and then to what Corinne spoke about, it's not for the lack of folks interested, BIPOC management or firms trying to get into it, or for for the fact that they are actually successful. It's not for those reasons that we have such minimal representation, but it's because of the structure in a very fundamental way that Tony just spoke about. So I think at some point we have to have the commitment to really assess a structure to implement sort of fail-safe categories of sort of pulling out biases that create assumptions that these firms might or might not be successful, and then really proactively integrate those management that are specifically titled as such. Just to recap on what everybody was really saying.
Thank you. Let's go to a vote on authorization of the controller to invest, sell, and exchange the funds of the retirement system. All those in favor, please indicate if you're in favor. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Next on the agenda is calendar item number 20, authorization to enter into an agreement with Civil's Inc. to provide real estate advisory services to the Board of Education Retirement System. May we have a motion to consider?
So moved.
Tony, second, and Tazeen. We have a facilities manager,
Oh, I see.
Soraya Buckler, here to tell us about this resolution. Soraya?
Good evening, I'm Soraya, the facilities manager here at BERS. Hi. BERS is currently in a sublease in this space until May of 2026. So in order to get a head start on what our options could be moving forward, we put out an RFP in February of this year to gain interest of real estate companies that have worked with the city or other agencies before that would be able to help us and support us through, whether that's renegotiating the lease here, that's finding a new space. And there's also the talk of a leasehold condominium, but that's just one of the options we would be pursuing. Following the submission of a proposal and subsequent presentation to the evaluation committee, the evaluation committee has recommended Seville's Inc. to serve as BERS real estate advisor. The board is requested to approve an agreement with Seville's. There is no cost to BERS for advisory services. If we were to come into an agreement about a new space, the landlord would take on those costs.
Ms. Raya, any questions from the board? Any questions from the board? Seeing none, let's go to a vote. All those in favor of approving calendar item number 20, please indicate your approval. Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Authorization to amend an agreement with Vitech Systems, calendar item number 21. May we have a motion to consider? Our marriage with the motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Anthony Giordano, second. We have a supervisor of business information management, Jessica Samuel, here to discuss this resolution. Jessica?
She's virtual.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Jessica?
Can you hear me?
It's not Vita, she's BERS staff. It's
Easy.
Anita had wanted to speak.
So,
And I think earlier Salil had his hand raised.
well, I can fill in very quickly for Jessica. Jessica is our project manager for CPMS and Velocity. And what we found out is that we ran out of storage space at AWS, which we contract through Vitech for. This is to add to our contract $50,000 to pay for incremental data storage capacity.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the board? Seeing no questions, all those in favor of calendar item number 21, please state your approval. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. So attorney, the next item on this afternoon's meeting's agenda is an attorney-client session. Karen, can you please turn off the recording? We're now back in public session. We're gonna need a vote to ratify all of the prior acts of the board. May we have a motion to consider?
So moved.
Greg made the motion. Do we have a second? Second, was that Gladys? Oh, okay. Alex, we're gonna go one by one.
There is an agenda item that we just skipped, and I think.
22.
Direction of the controller regarding the use of BIPOC investment managers.
Do we have a motion to consider direction to the controller regarding the use of BIPOC investment manager?
It's publicly table.
I'll move the table.
And I seconded.
It's motion to table by Greg Faulkner, second by Effie. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, let's move. All those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Calendar item number 22.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Seeing none, motion carries to table calendar item number 22. Now back on ratification of prior acts of the board. We had a motion by, is that Tony?
So moved.
Greg second. Now Alex, are we on one?
There are 4 items. So we've got the original BIPOC resolution from June. We've got the minutes of the May 29th meeting, ordinary business of BERS from May 29th, and the authorization of the controller to invest. So the first item, I think you probably want to table because you tabled the previous item. And the other 3 are just routine, and I would recommend that you pass them if you can.
Separate out.
Yes, separate item one by one, so I'll call them out. All in favor of approving the minutes of the May 9th, 2023 board meeting, please indicate your approval.
Consensus.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The motion carries. Next one, all in favor of approving of approval of the ordinary business of the Board of Ed Retirement System, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. All in favor of approving authorization of the controller of the city of New York to invest, sell, and exchange the funds of the retirement system, please indicate your approval. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Point of order.
Yes,
Just
sir.
to clarify, Alex, do minutes need the majority of the whole to be approved?
It's just the same as any act. Are you wondering because of who attended or? It's the same as any act.
Because in some places I heard that you don't need, like, unless people object, you don't really need like that many people to approve the minutes.
I don't have a ready answer to that. I would just presumptively treat it like any other motion, but I could look into that.
Because people adapt the minutes and then they can modify the minutes, so I'm just wondering. It would be good if we get an answer later. Thank you, Alex.
So we clarify. For clarification purposes.
No.
No.
I don't know if anybody else is. So.
So I don't want it to be an assumption that we're just, the second resolution, the BIPOC resolution, I think we should officially go through the process and tabling that one as well, rather than just saying, yes, we should do it because of the other one. So all in favor of approving the resolution to amend the investment policy statement in relation to the use of Black, Indigenous, and people of color financial institutions for the Board of Ed Retirement System of the City of New York, please indicate your approval. Greg, I see your hand.
Yeah, just a procedural question for Alex. We just voted on the minutes for the June meeting, which included the BIPOC resolution. We passed the minutes. Does that automatically mean we adopted everything that was included in those minutes?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I don't think that would mean that.
No, we actually approved the minutes of the May 9th.
Yeah, it was the minutes of May 9th, which had been approved in June.
Approved June.
Okay,
The earlier approved.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can I,
That's correct.
I'm just curious.
Can I ask a procedural question? Is there a way to go off the record?
We can go into attorney-client if you have a legal question.
No, I guess it's not a legal question. I guess it's a point of information. Is it appropriate to make a motion to table? Or is there, did you make a motion to vote yay or nay, or can somebody make a motion to table the approval of the?
Okay,
So
so
Greg just asked a question he didn't table, so anybody can make a motion to table.
So I'll
Is
make
that
a-
correct?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
I'm not really an expert parliamentarian, but I would, Chair, if I were you, I would allow it because I think that, this is what you were expecting. You were expecting a motion, right? And
Yeah, so Allison, are you,
I'd like to make a motion to table so that we could have a fulsome conversation about how to most effectively, within our fiduciary role as trustees, execute the priorities of this board to increase our access to minority managers.
second by Tanzine, any discussion?
Sorry, what exactly is the motion?
is a motion.
From the June.
It's a motion to table the ratification of the original BIPOC investment resolution from June, which didn't have 14 votes, so it was on the list of items for potential ratification. Allison moved to table.
But we did have 14 votes to approve the minutes of that meeting, which my question is, does that now mean that we have endorsed everything that just, if you do it later, I mean, I
think that what it-
No, my understanding is we're proving that that's the record, not the actual results.
The minute is just that. Okay, so
But
I
that
have a
should be,
question in terms of tabling the ratification. Doesn't that change than what we did in June?
Doesn't count, basically.
It doesn't, so it's just like we did not, so that whole discussion, everything just didn't happen or.
No, the discussion happened because we voted on the
But the vote
Don't vote.
The vote did.
doesn't, okay. And so us tabling now is what?
It means you will continue the discussion at the next meeting.
Yes. That's on, thank you.
Then clarity.
Effie, I saw your hand. Any more, no more discussion. All those in favor of tabling the BIPOC resolution from the June meeting, indicate if you're in favor. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
So the everything is, and I was only trying to table it in June.
Impression.
Table for different reasons. It's.
We have.
For tabling, basically.
So our resolution.
See, me and you can talk and all. Huh?
So the next calendar item is in executive session. Do we have a motion to move into executive session?
Second.
We have Greg made the motion, second by Tony. All those in favor? Please indicate if you're in favor. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We're now in executive session. Karen, please turn the recording off and remove. We are now back in public session. Alex, can you please report out the board's action during executive session?
Certainly. During executive session, the board voted against an authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the real estate portfolio.
The next agenda item, thank you, Alex. The next agenda item is calendar item 25, amendment to the asset allocation policy for the investments of the Board of Ed retirement system. May I have a motion to consider? Motion, John Matarich, second. You have a second?
Second.
Tony, second. We have the Deputy Director of Investment Strategy, Salil. Can you tell us about this resolution?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. We have Siegel Marco here to give a presentation on this, but the summary is what Sandy gave at the very beginning. At a very top level, we've done a multi-stage analysis, asset allocation, and we've worked with input and collaboration with the comptroller of New York City, as well as the actuary and Siegel Marco and our internal staff. We've done asset allocation, liability modeling, as well as optimization around liquidity constraints. And as Sandy mentioned, we'll have a slight reduction in private equity as well as international. And the last thing I want to say before turning over to Siegel Marco is that the summary from the work is that we should be able to have the highest chance of being comfortably above the 70% investment return over a very long horizon, and have a more smoother ascent to the funding ratio. And then we'll talk about in future meetings the expression of this asset allocation in terms of things like indexation or passive versus active. So with that, I'd like to share the slides from Siegel Marco, and Vanessa and her team can talk to them. So if you could just bear with me one moment.
Thank you, Salil. I'll start. So for some of you that I have not met before in person, I'm Vanessa Vargas, and I'm your general consultant representing Siegel Marco. My colleague here, John Ross, is the co-head of our risk management team. And right next to him is Frank Salamoni, which is a director in the risk management team. Today, we're going to talk to you all about asset allocation, and asset allocation is the most important decision that you as fiduciaries make on behalf of the pension plan. A formal asset allocation review is expected to be completed about every 3 to 5 years. The last time that BERS did an asset allocation review was about 4 years ago. The asset allocation formally gets reviewed anytime that there are either plan changes or there is a change in capital market forward-looking capital market assumptions. Your one consideration that I want you to notice, because you will see it in the presentation, is even though the QPP, the Qualified Pension Plan, has a 7% return hurdle, because the assets are aggregated with the TDA and that has a higher return hurdle, you will see that the expected long-term return that we're reaching for, it's higher than that 7%. Salil mentioned it, but we have actually presented to the executive committee at least 3 times since the spring, the asset allocation. And we have worked with the staff and with the controller's office, so the BERS staff and the controller's office, where we started with a larger number of candidate portfolios and then narrowed it down to be able to present to you all today a recommended asset allocation mix. So with that, every asset allocation starts with forward-looking capital market assumptions. So I'm gonna pass it on to John Ross, who's going to walk us to our Siegel Markow's capital market assumptions, what has changed and what they are going, as of this year.
Thanks, Vanessa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us. So I'm going to jump ahead to slide 6. So Leo, thank you for your help. And in the interest of time, I'll keep this pretty high level. Fair to say that the risk management team within Siegel Marco is responsible for publishing and upholding the forward-looking capital market assumptions from year to year. We formally start that review every October of every calendar year, so we're ramping up for the 2024 assumptions. But fair to say that we realize, especially from a research perspective, we don't have a corner on the market in terms of information in capital markets. So we rely on our other research colleagues to basically roll through this process. So we talk to Alpha, who is in touch with money managers all the time. We all know that money managers have views and opinions about markets as well. So we try to glean as much of that information as we can. And then separately, our GPS, or Global Portfolio Solutions team, is one of their key tenets is making sure that our solutions are implementable across our institutional client base. If we can't implement a solution for you that's driven by our capital market assumptions, then it's only information, and it really is of less use. So it's a collaborative effort here, as demonstrated on page 6. If I move ahead to slide 7, within the risk management team, we have 3 primary models that drive our assumption methodology. We think of it as a triangulation approach towards establishing what are relevant, in our view, relevant risk, return, and correlation assumptions for the asset classes, with the primary objective being enabling you, our clients, to make informed decisions. Our objective is not solely to try and get a number right over the next 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years. We do a pretty good job at doing that, but our sole objective is to make sure that we help you understand what you're making a decision about, what the risks are associated with those decisions from a capital market assumption perspective, and how that might impact the plan in that decision-making process. I'm going to kind of distinguish here between one versus the other 2 components. If I could direct your attention to the bottom of this slide where it says risk-free rate plus risk premium equals an asset class return. We essentially bifurcate any asset class return into 2 primary components: risk-free rate and the risk premium. Think of the risk-free rate as driven by 90-day T-bills. That has a direct corollary to our yield curve analysis, which is the top dark blue box representing one of the models that we use. This basically reflects the changes in interest rates year over year and period over period. As many of us know, rates have changed significantly, or did change significantly, coming into 2023 and throughout the year. That has driven a material change in our 2023 assumptions, which is driving a different consideration simply from a risk management perspective for all of our clients. Essentially, I'll boil it down to one comment, and that is that risk-free rate is 90 basis points higher for 2023 than it was in 2022. That's driven by all the changes, all the increases that the Fed has incorporated on the short end of the yield curve. So that flows through directly to every asset class. So the risk-free rate is common to every asset class. The risk premium varies from asset class to asset class, depending on whether it's publicly traded, privately traded, if there's a liquidity premium and the like. So plenty of risks go into each risk premium for each asset class. So that yield curve analysis basically is a model where you recreate the yield curve at the end of September and at the end of October and project forward what we think the yield curve will look like 5, 10, 15, and 20 years going forward. That's a significant component as that drives our risk-free rate for every asset class. So it's 90 basis points higher for 2023. The other two models, the building block analysis and the CAPM or capital asset pricing model reverse optimization, complement the yield curve analysis. None of the three is designed to have a heavier weight. I mean, frankly, that yield curve analysis is pretty important. But each of the three serves as a system of checks and balances for us as a team to be able to go back and say, if we have a risk premium for a certain asset class driven by the building block analysis, the CAPM pricing model reverse optimization allows us to look at what the markets are telling us today, what that risk premium ought to be, say for developed non-US equity, and make sure that we're within the realm of consideration. And if we fall outside of something that the market is telling us today is relevant, that gives us reason to go back and relook at our assumptions, relook at our process and how we got to a particular number. I won't go through specific numbers. I can tell you that you can look up and down our asset class list and say, you know, the volatility for this asset class feels a little high, or the return on this asset class or risk premium might feel a little low, and have a very logical explanation for that. Our objective, again, towards making informed decisions, is to create a logical progression from low-risk asset classes to high-risk asset classes along a capital markets line that makes sense, right? That makes sense from an optimization perspective. That makes sense from a simulation perspective. When we simulate 2,000 different economic scenarios each year, we want to make sure that the relative relationships are consistent so that, again, it feeds this process of making asset allocation decisions and again, helping to kind of identify and express what risks might be associated with any changes in a particular asset allocation. So I'm going to stop there and pass it to Frank to just add a little more color around why we do strategic asset allocation.
Salila, if you can go to slide 9, please.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So really, when we're talking about where we're going, why are we doing this asset allocation? Really what we're trying to do is, once we know what your objective is, we're trying to get you there in the most efficient way. And this is what we were talking about the last time we were speaking, is that point of doing an asset allocation here is to present you with a portfolio option that's going to get you to where you want to be with the least amount of risk, right? So that's really how we're defining efficiency, getting the most return for a given level of risk. And that's really the whole point of how we're designing everything from efficient portfolios with these optimizations and everything else.
No, US trustees do have considerations for the BERS plan. So, and Salil mentioned some of this. One of your considerations is liquidity. How much illiquidity you add into a portfolio by an asset class, the basket clause change, allowing you to have higher level of illiquidity. However, because your funded status is almost close to 100%, you don't need to increase your allocation to those basket clause asset classes to achieve that return. Cash flows, we are considering cash flows because you're expected to be cash flow negative from the city going forward because of your funded status. So those are items that we take into consideration when developing and picking within the mixes of the candidate portfolios that we discussed with the controller's office and that we would discuss with investment staff, and then came back to the BERS executive committee.
Thanks. Great, we can go to the next slide.
Go to the next slide, a little bit. Thank you.
Oh,
No, yeah, one before. 10, slide 10. You can talk through it.
There might be a delay. I'm on slide 10 right now.
Perfect, perfect. So this next slide really shows you the importance of the decision that you're making here. The really strategic asset allocation decisions are really the dominant kind of that is a dominant force that's going to be impacting how your portfolio is going to be expected to perform in the future. So really, I know we spend a lot of time talking about manager selection or security selection. Really, at the end of the day, this is the most important decision you're going to make because just by the sheer amount of risk and return that's going on with these portfolios, deciding how much to put into equities or fixed income is going to be very impactful on your future returns. Because that is where that is the most dominant risk aspect of your portfolio. So that's why it's critical to get this decision and spend time.
Yep.
Question.
So all of these assumptions are based on a passive portfolio. And we've discussed as a board at length, the desire to have a more diverse investment population. How does that dovetail in with a passive portfolio? If I look at US equity and it's goes to 34%, if you're passive with 70% of the assets, where does that leave room for the board to make active investments? And is the plan to not be active at all? And how would that change the assumptions?
So our capital market assumptions on the public market side are passive. So the expected return that you see here, it is passive. It is not active. There is some sort of fees in private equity, private credit, because there's not really a benchmark for you to invest there passively. Like there isn't a way of passively investing that. So that's the assumption piece. In terms of your question, that's more like implementation.
Because I'm just noting that 50% of the assets is publicly traded, right? So the tendency of the board is to go passive and most large plans, by the way.
So
Can I ask that in a different,
let me suggest to you, John, that the question of active versus passive is separate from the question of asset allocation.
That's fine.
Once you make asset allocation, you can decide to transfer from passive to asset to active. And then the only question remaining for the board to determine is active more attractive than passive for a specific allocation within publicly traded securities.
And I have no opinion at this time. I just wanted to.
Yeah,
That's a separate question. We could go 100% active and we could defend it by saying active outperforms passive, but then it has to do that.
Can I actually have a different, maybe it's jumping ahead, but around the allocation. The proposal, and because Sandy mentioned it earlier, is to decrease our private equity allocation, increase public equity and fixed income, which have historically been more challenging, particularly I think on the fixed income side, is my understanding, to find where there are not as many managers of color in that space. Will decreasing our private equity allocation have the unintended consequences of hindering our other goals of finding more diverse managers?
I disagree, but that's
That's
an
my
implementation.
question, so
Okay,
great.
so you'll go to the next page, please. So from an implementation perspective, BERS actually has few in their active fixed income, core active fixed incomes, because BERS
That's a black bullet firm.
that's a Black-owned female firm. And when we actually presented that recommendations to the BERS board years ago, we actually presented with a higher allocation to that manager, and the controller's office did not want to invest as much.
Higher administration,
Did not want to invest that much. Did not want to invest that much with them. So they've reduced the mandate size, but we had basically done an up to, and I can't remember the top of my head. Yeah, it was like 200 million or something like that to that manager, because it's 100% a diverse. I call them diverse managers, not MWE. I call them diverse managers. So it was a diverse manager and a diverse manager that would benchmark to core, because the controller's office takes fixed income and they divide it by the buckets: corporate, mortgage, And they invest by the sleeves. Most of the investment is actually passive. Instead of being active, we prefer that in fixed income, we be more active. So that's why that recommendation was to invest with a core fixed income manager, active, and it was also representation from a diverse perspective.
Thank you.
And the
Performance too.
and it has had.
That's right. I would assume.
And in part of the implementation discussions that we had while we were discussing asset allocation, I agree with Sandy, there are two separate conversations. Was to talk about those diverse managers that we have added to the lineup that have been maintained at I'm gonna say a lower market value, and the possibility of increasing those market value if it makes sense.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
I think
How often do you assume that we're rebalancing?
So we don't rebalance the portfolio. The controller's office has the responsibility of rebalancing.
When you simulate, how often do you assume rebalancing?
Annually.
Annually, which is completely different from what the controller's office is doing.
And we're gonna look into that, Effie. We're gonna investigate that question because one of the questions is, what's the optimal rebalancing strategy? Do you rebalance within a collar or do you only rebalance when you break a collar?
I believe rebalancing is one of the topics of discussion in Friday's meeting, because I think in Friday's BAM University, because I think there's a misunderstanding. of what
There's
there actually
parameters that the
is.
board sets and BAM will move the portfolio accordingly, consistent with whatever the asset allocation is. We're not making I should say they. We're not to be clear, Al and I are not on the investment side of BAM. They're not making tactical bets. They're
rebalancing on a weekly basis.
They're simply rebalancing to whatever the board has approved.
But not within bands, just every week we're rebalancing no matter
Within
what.
bands.
No, within bands that are.
Within the bands of approved.
Within bands.
Yeah.
Yes, within.
But the distinction, John, the distinction is actually clear. There are academic papers on this that ask the question, is it wise to rebalance to a specific target number or wait to rebalance until you break the collar?
Yes.
And the academic studies
We're not
suggest
defending.
rebalance until you break the collar.
I'm
So
not
the question is, do they
defending, I'm
break
not
the collar?
defending a position or not, I'm just making the point, there are some parameters, they stick to those parameters, it's not tactical, is the main point that I wanted to.
Well, it's tactical if you rebalance when you're still within the collar. That's a tactical allocation based on academic studies of the question.
Yeah,
We
it-
want the people who actually do it and understand what they do.
Yeah.
Let's, yeah.
I'm not, just to clarify, I'm not even bringing like a debate here, what we should do. I'm just pointing out that the simulation doesn't reflect our our implementation.
So
John Ross,
Let me address that.
he has a comment and then we'll go to Tony.
Thank you. So let me address that question specifically, Effie. Our assumptions are annual returns. Our simulation is annual simulations. So we necessarily have to rebalance just for the purposes of that exercise annually. That we're not suggesting that an annual rebalancing approach is appropriate for any given client. I can tell you that the academic work also suggests that whether you it also suggests that as long as you're rebalanced, right, that you stand to gain 80% of the benefit of rebalancing, which is selling high and buying low, essentially, as long as you're rebalanced. So I say that more from the standpoint of the asset allocation analysis project and process versus whether we simulate quarterly rebalancing or simulate annual rebalancing, right? I don't mean to downplay it, but I think directionally, we're capturing the notion of rebalancing in the work. But we're not suggesting that an annual rebalance is necessarily appropriate for BERS.
Right, I'm just wondering if we do a more frequent rebalancing, if that's going to result in a different optimization result and suggest different weights versus what we're doing now.
Tony?
So listen, as a member of the executive committee, I've seen this presentation about 4 times now. And I gotta tell you, Antonio, as our longtime steward who has now left us, said that while things had changed, we were de-risking because of our status and our position. And this is basically the framework for doing that. And within the context of the framework, we can do different things. I think that we do have outstanding issues in terms of getting some clarification on what the rebalanced portfolio, or the rebalanced policy is. But as a whole, we're not deviating so dramatically from everything, right? We have the cash position now, that a couple of them, but I think at this point, there's been a lot of due diligence done on this and a lot of discussion done on this, and I'm ready to call the question on this.
But I think for the members that were not part of the executive committee, let me frame some of the changes.
Motion, you said.
Some of the changes. So if you look at just fixed income, and I know it's really hard because it's small on the screen, the controller's office has been managing cash on behalf of BERS. And what I added here was the allocation as of June 30th with placeholders, where you need to invest the money when you can't put the money to work yet in private capital. So they've been managing to some cash. So they have asked to have a strategic allocation to cash that represents what they've been managing to. And that's 50 basis points, which means that when we update the investment policy statement, we're now going to have to benchmark that cash because now it becomes a strategic allocation. We eliminated TIPS from the portfolio for inflation-linked bonds. TIPS was a small allocation, 3%. It doesn't mean that you have no inflation protection because you will still have inflation and real asset protection in your real estate portfolio that you still maintain. John Ross made a comment. One of the changes that we have right now in our capital market assumptions is that it's now fixed income is giving you a yield that it wasn't giving you in the past 10 years. So you can get a yield from core fixed income, and we are almost 100% funded. Therefore, we can reduce the risk by adding more to fixed income, which has a yield. We reduced a little bit high yield. It's really only 2 percentage points, I'm sorry, that we reduced. But when I looked at fixed income in total, it's only an increase by 1% as a total fixed income allocation. In equity, we have the same 47% allocation that we had in the prior asset allocation. We just shifted a little bit more to US, so more domestic centric, and a little bit lower allocation to non-US developed and emerging markets.
Vanessa, if I could just say one thing at that very point, that shift is also not just it's something you should be indifferent to. It actually reduces drawdown risk that people sometimes associate with stocks. You are shifting to the type of asset that does have lower tail risk for the modeling.
Yeah, in alternatives and real assets, we are reducing by 1 percentage point, all in private equity. Everything else we kept static. Another change that it's not obvious, in the past, real estate was divided into 2 categories, real estate core and real estate opportunistic. The controller's office, and we agree, asked that we combine it into one asset class and just say real estate because market environments are different. So if you have a static core and a static opportunistic, but the market tells you to invest in core and not in opportunistic, you can't do it if you're already at the max capacity there. So that's why that's combined, but the overall allocation stayed the same. And really, by doing those slight changes, we're only reducing return going forward by 10 basis points. So we're only going from 7.8 to 7.7 on the 10-year, 7.5 to 7.4 in the 20 years. But we're reducing risk by 50 basis points, which is a lot. And that's what we try to do in this asset allocation. Let's reduce the risk where we can without making significant changes.
So it seems that Siegel and Marco, you're creating a part of the strategy and working in collaboration with the controller's office around asset allocation, right? And I guess the previous conversation is the diversification of that. So I guess, my question is, how much analysis are you doing around the representation of that diversification when you bring this to us? Because it's top of mind, so it just seems like it's absent here.
It's because it's 2 different discussions. So asset allocation is one discussion, and then what you're mentioning is implementation. We do work with The controller's office.
Conversation is on their end.
It's combined, so we're the general consultant and we only really have a purview over equity and fixed income. Axia has a purview over alternative assets and real estate. And when we work together with the controller's office on the public equity side, and you will learn that if you attend the Friday, next Friday's BAM, is we have to go through RFPs and managers need to respond to RFPs, and we do the RFPs with the combined system, and a manager doesn't pass unless you have two consultants approve a fund to move to the next level. And then the BAM investments times needs to do a due diligence, and then they narrow the list further from that. So it is really a very lengthy process, but it starts with you have to have two consultants approve a manager, not just us.
So when we have the person that's coming from the controller's office to speak to, I guess, the implementation, it would behoove to have you guys in the room because you were in part working. Okay, so that's helpful. Yeah, okay, yeah, because I feel like it's too divergent.
Yeah, and I've seen the presentation from Taffy, I've seen the numbers. And I've actually talked to some of your diverse fund managers and to Salil about scheduling them because this board didn't approve those managers, prior boards did. And you need to have the context of their firms, who do they represent and who are they picking at that underlying, funds that you're investing in and what type of fee concessions they give and what type of help they give or not. But it's better to have an informed decision once you get the right data from the right people.
I think something that sometimes is missing in this conversation is we talk about the, as of today, static snapshot of the diversification of the different weights, but not what happens to the portfolio over the very long run. If you grow the portfolio, you have less funding risk, lower contribution risks. You have the capability within your portfolio to actually grow, and then within that, also do well for the specific managers that are there. If that makes sense, it just helps you contribute to that over a longer period.
That's good. If we wanted to change this, right, if the world goes awry and this is out of whack for what we need.
Do another asset
allocation.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, the trustees can decide if next year or the year after you want to do another asset allocation. And as I said, significant changes in market condition or a plan change, we do another asset allocation. We started this in the spring and we did, we're finalizing it now. You're the first system that is probably gonna finalize it. So we can accelerate things.
Okay, the time now is 7:07.
Message.
I'm gonna move that we go to a vote.
Okay.
On this. And so all those in favor of.
Lily.
Should be back.
So she hasn't left the building, her bag is still. Yeah, so when she come back, this.
While we wait, can I ask a question?
No.
Donnie asked plenty. First of all, did you get a chance to get the maximum drawdown numbers? Not on the slide.
That is on the last slide.
So Salil, go to page 25.
Are we gonna get an update of this? Because this is not matching what was in our written packet. There's slides in this that are not.
I sent the updated one about.
Yeah, it should have been available.
We'll
make sure it gets everyone.
Well, yeah, for the rest of the trustees, like in my personal experience, drawdown numbers are extremely important to look at.
My executive.
So I'm glad that we have them included now. We
Yeah.
didn't have it originally.
And actually, so Effie, one of the things that Salil's been working on is actually integrating all the curious structural issues about our system and looking at drawdowns so you can eliminate the worst exposures of risk. Because that's basically what they did.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you need, in theory, you can have an annihilation event that is complete drawdown, but you have to use some probability of essentially value at risk. So you'll see some numbers here, but the liability risk work we've done also looks at, you know, the standard allocation. And if you go with what we have, that there's a slight percentage decrease of having things like, you know, sub 50% funding ratio at some point over the next 30 years, or a $1.5 billion contribution 30 years down the road, as opposed to the 400 million that actuaries currently assume in the baseline.
Right, and Salil, I remind you to be cautious not to use only in-sample data when we simulate stuff like that.
Most such an
Yes, it's all out of sample is what you see. There's
Salute.
Let's go to a vote. All those in favor of amendment to the asset allocation policy for investments of the Board of Retirement System, please indicate now. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention?
We've had.
Motion carries. This is actually gonna be the last calendar item. All other calendar items that we may have had will move to the agenda of the next month's meetings. And so I'm gonna need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved, adjourn.
That's a first and a second.
So
I second.
If you
if I
mind,
leave, we won't have 14 votes. today.
That's a second, Greg? That's a second?
Yeah.
Second.
Seconded.
All those in favor of adjourning and.
Aye.
Any opposed? You wanna stay for another hour? Any abstentions? Have a good night, everyone.
Vanessa.